Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Triple R Show, Real Raw Recovery, where honesty meets healing every single day. And we are pleased to have back Dr. Harry Henshaw, who is a licensed mental health counselor and author of A Prelude to a Paradigm Shift in Addiction. Welcome, Dr. Harry.
Thank you. Just turning my fan off. Okay.
So glad to have you back with us. Just to review for our audience and for you, Dr. Harry, we've been having a progression here where we were talking about things that we used to miss while in active use. Through transformation, how we started living with intention, and that intention isn't just enough to be there physically, but once we transform, it actually changes who is showing up and not just being there present.
Mm-hmm. Right.
When we used to miss things, life was so fast, and we were running from point A to point B because we were living in the past. We're looking to the future, never in the present moment where our power is.
Correct. Which is one of the principles, right, of transformation. Right.
And then, when we started living with intention is when we started to slow it down a little bit, and we started listening to people and responding instead of naturally just reacting
Yeah.
without thinking.
And when we became more intentional, I mean, you mentioned we started listening to people, which is true. We started listening to other people, but probably more importantly, we started listening to ourselves. And we started to become present to that inner chatter, that inner dialogue. We became present to our thinking. When when we become intentional in that respect, now we're in the present moment. And when we're in the present moment, as you know, now we're accessing our power. So being intentional is really letting go of the past as much as possible and not concerned about the future, but really concerned about the only thing that's absolutely real, which is the present.
And staying in the present, I know for me personally, when I was able to start doing that and listen to people, I become much more empathetic to other people's situations because I had been in those situations. So I was building more of a connection with people,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Right.
which gave me a lot more peace in
Mm-hmm.
everyday situations, whether it was through work or family and loved ones, or even just people that you come across in everyday society.
Yeah. Well, you started listening to them as opposed to, like I'm sure you've done it. I know I've done it, where we start to create a script. We're listening to them, but we're not really listening to them, but we're creating a script in response to whatever they're saying, but we're not really listening to whatever they say. When we become intentional, now we're really listening to them. We're connecting with them.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head right there because I was preparing my answers to what they were talking about without even hearing what they were saying. So if somebody would have asked me what did they just say, there were a lot of times where I had no idea what they just said because I was already,
Well,
like you said, doing my script.
yeah. Well, we kind of turn the volume down on what they're saying, so we really don't. You're right. We don't hear them. But we got this really nice script we've designed that we're going to share with them. And it may or may not have anything to do with what they said.
Yeah, and we've had you on before, and we've talked about the 10 principles of transformation, which
Right.
I think, and I know obviously you do because
Hmm.
I got them from you.
Right.
Are critical towards our transformation, and it starts off with the responsibility and us being responsible for everything that we think, say, feel, do, and experience.
Exactly. Right. That's the one. Responsibility if is sort of the cornerstone. I know that we've talked about it, and we've talked about responsibility, choice, and powers being sort of the triangle, as you phrased it. But it all rests really on responsibility. If you can't assume responsibility, um, nothing else is going to follow. And responsibility is just acknowledging that we're the creator of our experience. Is really what it comes down to. Nobody's doing it to us or for us. We're doing it, and it's some work to assume that. It's not easy for a lot of people because we're sort of, I don't want to say that we're raised in a culture. Well, in some ways it's true. We're raised in a culture where responsibility is not really valued much. But it's a way of thinking. You know, I'm responsible for everything that I think, say, feel, believe, and do and experience. That doesn't leave out. It leaves out nothing. Everything we're responsible for.
And then I'm sure in your experience is that people are going to automatically assume because I'm taking responsibility, that's going to be associated with guilt and shame.
Yes, yes. And guilt and shame, blame and guilt, and shame goes along with the guilt, but really, blame and guilt are not responsibility. Because one of the things that separates them, that in responsibility, there's actually no judgment. There's just the acceptance that I did something. So, you know, you and I have talked about in our groups and stuff about acceptance and not accepting something, but judgment. That, you know, there's a lot of judgment in it. In responsibility, there's no judgment. It's absence of judgment. It's just I did this, and I take ownership of it, authorship of it, agency, however you want to put it. There's no judgment. In blame and guilt, there's no responsibility because all there is judgment. We're making wrong.
Yeah, and it does just because we're taking responsibility doesn't mean that we're condoning any poor choices that we had made in the past.
Absolutely not.
It's just,
Right.
and it also opens the door, which is a much easier path that than taking responsibilities to play the victim.
You're right. Exactly. Yeah. And well, when you refer to somebody else as the cause of your life or some situation, you've left responsibility and you've gone into victimization. You're absolutely right. And that we live in a world of a lot of victimization. And, you know, we have to navigate that.
So when we're dealing with somebody that's not familiar with this language and is not familiar with the concept of taking responsibility for everything in their life, how could we get that point across to them and where responsibility becomes hope as opposed to destroying it?
Right. Well, the thing is, one way, there's several ways to do it. One of the ways is if you're not taking responsibility, you really don't have any power to change your life. Victims don't change much. They just blame. And they stay locked in, they stay locked in the past. They stay locked in blaming somebody, but there's no movement. Because if I'm blaming you for my problems, you're going to have to do something before I can have any kind of change in my life. So, you know, it's just getting people to get into the thing about, do you really want to change your life? Somebody said, yeah, I do. Well, the only way to do it is to give up responsibility or give up victimization and assume responsibility. Responsibility is a tough conversation to have with people. And it's one of those conversations that maybe you'll have several times. They won't get it in the beginning. Um, I mean, I don't know how you were when you first heard the conversation. A lot of times there's a thing called my favorite subject, which you know is resistance. There's resistance when you hear the conversation about responsibility.
Yeah, when I first became in tune with responsibility, I always used the proverbial but,
Yes,
right? So yes, I understand what you're saying, but which always opened the door to somebody else being at fault for things that were happening in my life.
yes, yeah. But is a great linguistical tool um, to sneak in the thing about the response about to avoid responsibility. Yeah, I understand everything you're saying, but now I'm going to give you my excuse for why you're wrong. I mean, it's that sort of deal. But yes, you're right on the money. So,
And like everything that we talk about here with responsibility, it's one step at a time, even one small step at a time. Because once you start accepting a responsibility and you start seeing that path that yes, at some point this does come back to the choices that I've made.
yes.
It always comes back to us.
Well,
So then we seek out
yeah,
responsibility. I know now in everyday situations, I look for where am I responsible for what is going on in my life.
yeah. And the easiest way, you bring up a great point. Choice is the second principle of transformation, as you know. It's how we actualize responsibility. And it's like you could say to somebody, well, did you choose to sit in that chair? And you say, yeah. Well, then you're probably responsible for sitting in the chair. Oh, yeah, I'm definitely responsible. So there's ways to work in the two, but Choice is how we actualize responsibility.
Now, a lot of the choices that we're making are going to be based on how we feel about ourselves and our self image.
The self image governs everything. It governs your relationship with responsibility, with all the principles. If your self image is like the core of what we think about our value and worth as a human being. And it's really thoughts that we have about our values and worth. If we have a negative tint to it, then our choices, our decisions, our actions, our feeling, everything's going to have it's going to follow suit with a negative tint to it. So um, Maxwell Maltz, Dr. Maxwell Maltz, was the one that really coined the term self-image, and that's really what has to change. That's the source of what transformation is about: is changing self-image. Self-image changes, everything in your life changes. You look at yourself, you look at other people. Everything's different when you're self-image. It colors everything in our lives.
And that brings us back to the work with our mirror work and our affirmations.
Yes,
Because a lot of times we think that we have good self esteem and our self image is just fine, but our
right,
behavior is not dictating that, and our behavior doesn't lie.
right. Yeah, behavior never ever lies. Yeah, and as you know, I learned that I was a patient of a chiropractor in Miami, and he told me, he said, "Yeah, behavior never lies," and I got it like as soon as he said it. In fact, that's how you tell if your behavior is in alignment with your thinking. Then you're being authentic. You know, a lot of times people say, "Well, I really love myself," as you know, and when they're drinking and doing drugs and stuff, they really don't love themselves. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So they're out of alignment with each other. And that's how you open people up to, yeah, I really don't love myself. What's that all about? And once they do that, then they're open to at least taking a look at, well, why don't I love myself? But that's ultimately the conversation that people have to have. If someone continues to say, yeah, my self esteem is great while they're doing drugs and alcohol, you know, the one that's going to win out is going to be their behavior of using, for sure.
And I think that's the biggest eye opener because that's a question that you posed to me one
Right.
time. How's
Yeah.
your self esteem? And I said, well, it's great.
Yeah,
Until you pointed out where we were meeting.
exactly.
And that was an absolute eye opener. And then we do the mirror work, and then we slowly start developing that relationship with ourselves. But it doesn't end with the mirror. It's
No.
throughout the day because we're always in our head and we're always having thoughts. And
Right.
when those negative thoughts start to come in, is where we need to nip that in the bud, be aware of them, and reframe them.
Right. Well, this is, and as you know, it's something that we talk about in the morning group. This is where the concept of having a plan and being committed, this work doesn't take place in one day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year. I mean, this takes time because you think about it. How somebody gets to somewhere is the accumulation of lots of decisions, lots of thinking over their history. So, with someone like my age, it's been a long time. You have a lot of time you've racked up there. So you have to be committed, and you have to be patient and persistent. And that's where you get into. If you're impatient, then you're going to resist the process. If you're not into following suggestions, you're going to resist the process. If you have a lot of excuses, so it's working with your thinking to get yourself into a plan that's consistent with transformation. And a lot of people that this is it's Louise Hay once said, "This work is really simple, but it's not easy." And she was absolutely right on the money. This is work, but when you do it, your life changes.
And that's where you have to make the commitment to yourself to do this work. Because without that commitment, then you're not going to see that growth and you're not going to see that change. And now we're starting to get into where 6, 7, and 8
Yeah.
with the principles, and that's forgiveness. Because that was one of the hardest things for myself, and I'm sure a lot of our followers and people that are going through this and want to transform, is forgiving themselves.
Yes, yes,
And again, it doesn't mean that you're condoning anything. It's just the proverbial phrase: we did the best that we could with the knowledge, understanding, and awareness that we had at the time, and that tool was profound for me,
yes.
because we're not bad people.
No, no. The thing is, when you accept the fact that you're doing the best that you can, and it really rests, as you know that I've preached, I don't know how many times, it rests on knowledge, because knowledge is really power, as you know. So knowledge you get by reading, by having conversations. So the more knowledge you get, the better decisions you make. So at one time in your life, even when you were using, you were doing the best that you could with the knowledge, understanding, and awareness. So that, I think that principle of always doing my best allows me to give up me stop. It allows me to stop beating myself up. Yes, I made mistakes, but the deal is I'm not a mistake. So what I have to do is stay focused on learning things so that I can make better decisions for me. You know, my doing is not me. My doing is a result of me, of what I know. And and along, 7 and 8 sort of go together. I'm always doing the best I can, and I forgive myself for what I did in the past. They work hand in hand. But when you work those two principles, your life it changes like crazy. When they're actually all of the principles work together. As I've used the word in the past, they work like a matrix, and they all feed off each other, and they're interrelated. Even the 10th one, which I think is really the core of the whole thing. But yeah, they work together. They're very powerful in that respect.
And when you grasp that whole knowledge, understanding, and awareness, and you're able to forgive yourself, then it's much easier to forgive other people, because those people were doing the best that they could with the knowledge, understanding, and awareness that they had at the time.
Exactly.
And Wayne Dyer's, said there's no justified resentments, because if you have a resentment, then you're not forgiving and you're not growing.
Right, right. And if you have a resentment of somebody, it means you also have one of yourself. Because as you know, how we treat other people is just a result of how we're treating ourselves. So if we have built up resentments toward other people, we're judging other people. We've already judged ourselves. We can't judge other people unless we judge ourselves first. So if we work on not judging ourselves, just accepting the fact I make mistakes, I'm not a mistake. What I need to do is I need to keep reading, I need to keep doing the affirmations, the mirror work, all of this stuff. If I stay in my commitment, yes, is it going to be, we talked about it this morning in group. Is this linear work? No, it's not linear. This is sort of like a sine wave you would have in electronics or whatever. So it goes up and then it comes down. But a lot of times what you want to do is you want to smooth out all of the ups and the downs, and that means just consistency.
Now, with resentments and judgment, it's a lot easier to resent and judge other people than it is to look at ourselves.
Oh well, of course.
Because now we're just giving away responsibility, giving away our power.
Yes, exactly. And when we talk about other people, places, or things as being the source of the problem, we've missed the boat. We've missed the concept of responsibility completely. You know, when people talk, and a lot of people talk about people, places, and things in their lives being the source of their problems, and they've missed the fact that they created all of the problems. This is a tough conversation, but I think if people stay with it, they eventually get it. And I think it's not something that I talk about much, but I think it comes from my first discipline, which was philosophy. This stuff is true. It's not like, oh, it's relative. No, this is truth. When we start to study stuff that's true, we can't help but gaining all of the power from that truth. Truth and power are the same thing, ultimately. So this is sort of like leaving psychology and moving into philosophy, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, and again, with the people, places, and things, and I totally agree that in the beginning of your transformation and your recovery, that it's very important to be cognizant of the people, places, and things that you're associating yourself with.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But eventually, you have to understand that you are the people, place, and you are the thing,
Yep.
because you're the one that controls all of your experiences.
Yes.
And we're not going to just lock ourselves up in a closet for the rest of our lives to avoid people, places, and things.
No, you can't. You've got to, it's the thing about you've got to live in this world. You don't have to be of it, but you have to live in it, you know, and and that's work. And when you're living in the world, basically you're accepting people, you're practicing acceptance of people.
Yeah, when
And
you've done the work and you love yourself and you built your self esteem and you've forgiven yourself, then you're comfortable in being in any situation because you're
correct.
never going to let anything interfere with your transformation.
Right.
Your transformation is paramount, and there's nothing external
Right.
that's going to take place over that
Yes.
or interfere with that.
I totally agree with you. And the only thing that can interfere with it is you. We're the ones who have to do this work, and we're the ones who can, what's that word I like? Oh, sabotage. Yes. We're all good at sabotaging stuff. And, but sabotaging is just, getting in the way of you doing the work of transformation. So, transformation, the word itself means change.
Change.
Yeah, it just means that's all it means is change. Wayne Dyer did a piece on transformation where he said that real transformation is really changing your thinking. So, um, I mean, that's one of the writers that, as you know, that I like his work, and I think his work has something for this process. That whole concept of intention I got from Wayne Dyer.
And the change in thinking is, and this is going to be controversial for a lot of people. We're talking about people, places, and things. With the things, now while we're here, and this is a recovery support group for drinking and for using, but drinking, the drug and the alcohol is not the issue here.
Right.
It is the
Yeah.
thinking. And
Right.
when we start going down the road of saying that, you know, that we're diseased, and we start talking in physiological terms instead of psychological terms, then all of a sudden we've again given away our responsibility.
Right. And that's why, as you know, I encourage people to not talk in terms of physiological language, brain, that sort of stuff. You can, but I think you miss the point. When you start talking about your psychology, about your mind, about your thoughts, you're bringing it closer to you. I mean, it's something now that is up close and really, really personal. And I think that's the only way you you have to change how you think about um, this whole process. And again, not talking about, well, I'm the result of my brain. I don't believe, as you know, that people have a disease. I think they have a dis-ease, as Louise Hay said, but it's really more in psychology terms a disorder, the thinking disorder. And even people, a lot of people in hardcore recovery says, yeah, you don't have a drinking problem, you have a thinking problem. I I don't think alcohol and I don't think drugs have ever been the problem. Now, can they be lethal to a person? Of course they can. Damn near anything if taken can be lethal. A lot of things, but it's not those substances. It's it's how you think. If you're thinking negatively about yourself, you will attract into your life things that will hurt you, harm you, maybe kill you. And that's sort of like the formula. What we attract into our life is a result of how we think about ourselves. Again, we all come back to that one concept, self-image. If my self-image is healthy, if it is into acceptance and a lack of judgment, I'm going to attract into my life healthy things for me. And as you said one time, you said, well, if I do this work, can I have a drink? And I said, well, you know, you really won't want it. I mean, it won't be something that you choose. You'll choose other things.
Yeah, and the first time that I had said that to you and you gave me that answer,
Yeah.
Like, and I remember like it was yesterday, and I looked around the room like looking for validation because I had no idea what you were talking about
Right.
until I started doing the work, and now it's just it's simple, but it's simple when you do the work.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And talking about the psychological and the physiological, it will become physiological
Sure.
if you continue to do that. It will destroy your brain and your body and your organs.
Yes.
But
Yes.
that is not the cause of why you're doing it.
No. No. It's the one thing, and it's actually in principle 6, which I'm reading. My thoughts create what I experience in my body. So the deal is that if my thinking is healthy, if it's positive, then that's going to manifest in my body as taking care of my body. My body will be healthy. And a lot of people, have disorders and problems in their body, but it's ultimately a result of how they think about themselves. And I think modern science is ultimately, or modern medicine is actually moving in this direction, and is slowly but surely, I think, going to get there. Um, Louise Hayes, studied a thing, science of mind, which that's a proponent of. Transformation principle 6 is primarily from science of mind. My thoughts create what I experience in my body.
Yeah, we put an emphasis on our thought process and our thinking here,
Yeah.
but you know, even with and we differ from 12-step approaches in a lot of ways. But even with 12 steps, it's written in the literature that in order to get over from drinking, you need a complete change in attitude and thinking.
Yes. Yes.
But it's not in the forefront.
Correct. Correct. Yeah. I mean, let's when you start to become conscious of the machine, the mind, you're not your mind. You're your thoughts. And you're generating those thoughts. Those thoughts have, and you're choosing them. You're choosing all of them. And that when you choose those, you're choosing what you experience. Everything. It's like we're choosing and creating from inside out, not like outside's coming into us. It's actually the reverse. We're creating everything in our mind, and it's being manifested or projected outward. All of our experiences are basically a projection of what we see, of what we think rather, what we think and believe about ourselves, and then about the world.
And then you'll also hear in regards to using it and to drinking is that I have an allergy,
Yes.
or that I've always been an addict or an alcoholic,
Right.
if those are the terms that they're using for identification,
Right.
even before I used or drank.
Right.
But and those are all the same concepts that come back to comfortable in your own skin,
Right.
insecurity, self image.
Right. Right. Well, it goes back also to the disease model. That once you're an addict, always an addict. But a lot of people say, "Well, I've always been an addict, or I've always been an alcoholic." Well, I don't believe that at all. I don't believe in the disease concept. I don't believe that people have a disease; they have the disorder. Um, but but once you accept that, then you accept a lot of negativity. A lot of people who believe they have a disease, they kind of lock themselves into not being able to change. But it's because they can't do anything about it. They believe if they believe they have a disease, they believe they're powerless. I know you don't believe that, and but a lot of people really believe they're powerless, and that's so far from the truth. Because basically, principle number what is it, number 5? No, number 3. We have the power. We've always had the power. We try to give it up, but we can't give it up. It's one of those things like responsibility, choice, and power. They're absolutes. You can't get rid of them. Sorry, you've got them.
And
So
when you start saying or using the diseased brain
right,
or an allergy, then again it comes back to responsibility, not accessing your power and making a reservation for that back door that you've left open.
Yes.
Because when you do go out the back door instead of the front door, you can always say, and you can always fall back on, well, what was I supposed to do?
Yes. Hmm. Yep. Absolutely. And but it is. This is a. I think we've talked about just about we've all of the principles, but the one that is the last and probably my favorite.
And for the audience, you're talking about making our plan.
No, that the plan is in I am committed.
Nine.
It's in 9. When I say that I'm committed to doing the work, I'm committed to having a plan. And as you know, the expression "plan your work, work your plan" um, is really the essence of that. If you have a plan and you're working it, then you're committed. If you have no plan, you're not committed. And
So with the commitment and then with the 10th principle with source and higher power,
right,
then that's where spirituality is going to come into the game.
but that's where spirituality. It was always a missing for me until I did this work. And now you're saying all of this work is about our identity, okay? Which is sort of it's not so much a psychology term; it's more of a philosophy term. It's about our identity. Who are you? And I'm not good enough. That's a statement about my identity. You know, I am not enough, which is used to be my identity when I was like doing not so good things for myself. So the thing is, when we start to love ourselves, we start to find out who we really are. And who we really are is I am spirit, source, higher power, God. Do you remember Wayne Dyer's video? He said, that's not blasphemy, that's our identity. And when when we learn how to love ourselves authentically, we love ourselves. Now we're starting to access God because God is love. And now in this act of loving ourselves, we're not only accessing God, we're becoming that. And then you have the statement, I am. So we start to discover who we really are. It's a game changer, it's a life changer, it's spirituality that to me makes sense. We've always been spirit, we've always been source, we've always been higher power. We just have these beliefs that block us from our real identity, who we really are. And those beliefs are, well, I'm just not good enough.
And then through the work, when we open the door to loving ourselves and having that flow through us, now all of a sudden it's much more easier to show that love and to give that love to other people.
If the only way you can give it to somebody else is you open that door and you start to walk through that process where you meet your real identity, when you start to authentically love yourself, then you can authentically give it away. Any other version of that is really just manipulation. It's using people. It's not really loving them, not caring about them. You can't care about somebody unless you care about yourself.
Yeah, because you don't know how to love someone if you don't know how to love yourself. Like
Not
you
even
just said.
not even close. You may say the words, but your behavior will give away your real intention. Like you said, your behavior always tells the truth. Unfortunately, you know, so, and usually when people don't love themselves and they tell somebody else they're loving them, they're just manipulating them for whatever.
And as we close out here, I mean, that's a great tool for everyone doing this transformation work to kind of as a self checklist to find out where you are and to
Yes,
see how am I doing? Well, just look at your behavior and look at your actions. Are they
absolutely.
reflective of loving yourself? Are
Yeah.
you making good choices for yourself?
Yes. You have to. The simplest thing when people do this work, I want to use the word clinically or in counseling, is you check out your behavior. If your behavior, if you're really treating yourself well, and like you're eating well, you're exercising, and all, and you're taking care of you, total, then you're on the path. Now, if you're doing stuff like smoking and stuff that we know is not good for us, then you've got to have another conversation. A lot of times people You know, the latest thing, research is showing that there's no real difference. People vape a lot. And they think like, oh well, it's not as bad as cigarettes. Well, we know now it may be worse. So the deal is what we're doing is we're harming ourselves. If we harm ourselves in any way, there's something there that's missing about our authentically loving ourselves. That's just a true statement, in my opinion. Hard for people to take that, but it's a true statement. Yeah.
Well, you hit the nail on the head when you said that it's easy work, but it's difficult,
Yes. It's
right?
simple. It's simple. Very
Yeah,
simple. But it's not easy.
and that comes down to the commitment. But once you start doing it consistently, and you start seeing through those small steps progress, that's
Yes.
when it starts to snowball.
Right. And you got to be careful at that point when you start to get those things, because then you know my favorite poster, right?
You got this.
Yeah, and you don't.
Yeah.
So you've got to remind yourself when you're making progress, there's more. In fact, the best thing to say is there's always more. I'm actually glad that there is more, because I can't conceive of reaching a point where there is no more. I
And
wouldn't
that
want
brings
that.
us back to our journey and our destination,
Yes, exactly. But you
right?
have to fall in love with the journey, because there is no destination, which is hard for people. But that's from the Peaceful Warrior. That's another conversation. So
Yeah, and we've gone over that before. So instead of trudging through the journey to get to the destination, breathe it in,
right,
because that's the most special part of it all.
yep. When people believe there's a destination, sometimes they make up that they arrived. Oh, I've already got this. Now they're in trouble. They're in serious trouble, because what they're probably going to do is pull back or slack off on doing the work, and you know where that leads people. I mean, you know personally from knowing people.
Yeah.
They think they got it, and then they're off down the proverbial rabbit hole. So, which is not good.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike, and I hope you're enjoying our podcast. And I just wanted to remind everybody that Real World Recovery at realworldrecovery.org, we do offer one-on-one coaching sessions for transformational therapy, where we focus on personal responsibility and self-esteem, which we believe is the true essence of long-term sobriety and happiness. We do offer a free 30-minute consultation where you and I sit down, I get to know your story, you get to know my story a little bit more, and we start developing a plan for you moving forward. So we look forward to getting to know you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the podcast. So the takeaway is there is no destination. Continue to do the work and enjoy doing the work. Because when you get to the point where the work becomes operational and it's part of your life, then
Yes,
that is where you see long-term growth and
that's well that,
long-term sobriety.
and that's where you start to live transformation. You're living it now. It's not work anymore. It becomes your life. This was a good conversation today. I
Yeah,
like that.
always is, Dr. Harry. Thank you again for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have you. And
Same here.
again, everybody, thank you for joining us on the Triple R Show, Real World Recovery, where honesty meets healing every single day. And we will see you tomorrow. Bye bye.
Bye bye.